Joseph, ruler of Egypt. Egypt, land of the river Nile, of pyramids and mighty pharaohs. This is the land to which Joseph, a Hebrew lad, was brought as a slave from the land of Canaan.
Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him, and he cried, "Cause every man to go out from me." And he wept aloud. And the Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I am Joseph. And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. And Joseph said unto his brethren, Come near to me, I pray you. And they came near. And he said, I am Joseph your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt.
Honestly, Rob, I don't see what the problem is. This is a great lesson, big emotional scene. It's sort of like an ancient reality show, and this is the big reveal, right? Joseph tells his brothers his secret identity. They've thought he was probably dead all this time. I mean, I always cry when we get to this part. So stop making excuses and get your lesson put together.
With all due respect, honey, you are out of your mind. I like the story of Joseph. It's got everything. But most of that everything is skipped over here. Didn't you notice that? Think about this. In our last episode, Joseph's brothers have sold him into slavery. And now, right off the top, he's this big-time international dude. He's saved the nation of Egypt, and he's on the cover of People magazine, plays tennis with King Tut, and we just kind of skipped over everything that got him there. Don't our people want to know what happened between the outhouse and the penthouse? I mean, did you ever tell our kids the story of the three bears and begin with Goldilocks running out of the house screaming?
Oh, well, maybe once or twice when I was in a hurry.
No wonder they always wanted to sleep with the lights on.
Look, just start your lesson off by filling in some of the missing details. Like we always do, you know. They've all heard these stories before anyway. Just explain that after he was sold, Joseph ends up as a slave for a man named Potiphar, who is married to this kind of desperate housewife.
See, right there. That's a much better lesson. Why are we skipping the whole Potiphar's wife episode? Everybody likes that. You got sex, lies, and we can edit in the videotape. And no grown men hugging each other and crying.
Anyway, that's our first hint that Joseph has integrity. He has earned a real place of trust in Potiphar's household, and life is better for him. But now he has to resist temptation, which he does.
I would love to teach a lesson on temptation.
Some other time, hon. So, Potiphar's wife frames him and gets him thrown into prison. Then, this is where he thinks God has really deserted him, punished him for a crime he hasn't done.
Down in the dungeon, this is where he meets the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker, correct?
Oh, no, Rob, that's in Mother Goose. In the Bible, it's the baker and the cupbearer.
Close enough.
And this is where the dreams come in again. But this time, he's interpreting them. He tells the cupbearer his dream means he's getting his release soon and will be back working for the Pharaoh. And when the parole comes through, Joseph shakes his hand and says, Please put in a good word for me. But of course, the cupbearer forgets all about him.
And the other guy, his dream isn't so good, right?
Nope. His dream means he's going to be put to death, which happens. So now it's just Joseph all by himself.
Doesn't he start digging out and he puts a pin-up poster over the hole in the wall?
That's the Shawshank Redemption.
I always get them mixed up.
Oh, so Pharaoh now starts having dreams, and the cupbearer hears about it and says, "Hey, I know a guy who's good with dreams. Actually, I was supposed to tell you about this guy a couple of years ago, but with all the excitement and all, it's kind of slipped my mind. I guess that was wrong."
So they go drag Joseph out of the hole, and Joseph listens to the dream and tells Pharaoh what's up with the coming drought. And Pharaoh says, "That is awesome. And as a small token of my appreciation, I'm going to write up a full pardon for you. And heck, while we're at it, how do you like the sound of being made second in charge of the whole empire from now on?" And Joseph says, "Well, let me see. Dungeon versus helping run the empire. Dungeon versus..."
So time moves on, and this is where the family comes in. Way back at the home front, Jacob and his family and all the cattle are losing a lot of weight, getting hungry, and they say, the New People magazine has this article about Egypt and how it has storehouses full of grain. They have this guy on the cover who's supposed to be the grain czar, and he seems nice, Maybe if we go down there, they'll share a little of their stuff with us.
Look, I do remember some of what happens next. And the brothers go up there, and then they go back, and then they go up there and back, and it gets complicated. There's no way we have time to tell all those details, especially the way you do details of details.
But I like details.
Let me do this part of the story real quick here. Get through it. I think people are okay with the Reader's Digest version.
No.
They go down and say, "Your Excellent Egyptian Highness," and you can see we're all really skinny and can we borrow a few cups of grain? And Joseph sees they have no clue who he is. So he really messes with them. He keeps sending them home, giving them all these assignments, and he plants incriminating stuff in their luggage.
You're leaving things out.
And he takes one of them prisoner. I remember that part. I forget which one was.
Benjamin. That's the whole point. He forces them to bring Benjamin, even though their father didn't want Benjamin to be in the line of fire. He was very explicit about that. And now Joseph accuses them of stealing his silver cup, which he had one of his cronies place in Benjamin's bag. And they just said, "If you find that cup in anyone's bag, you can execute him, and the rest of us will be your slaves." Because, see, they have no idea they've been set
Yada,
up.
yada, yada. See what I mean about how complicated it is? We could be here forever. I can never remember all this stuff.
Have you ever thought that it's not part of the lesson? We've got to get on to Moses next week, right?
Fine. But how much sense does it make to just skip over the whole plot, and all that's left of the lesson is a bunch of big, ancient, bearded guys hugging and sobbing together?
You're impossible. Look, I'll start up the title frames and you teach your lesson. As usual, I'll be here to correct all 10 or 15 details that you get wrong.
Okay, but I still don't think it makes any sense. Last week, we had a whole good story, but no happy ending. This week, we have the happy ending with no story to go with it.
Just teach, please.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look at the scripture. We're in Genesis chapter 45, the first 15 verses. Let's read. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Send everyone away from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers could not answer him. So dismayed were they at his presence. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." And they came closer. He said, "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are 5 more years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, 'Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You shall settle in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near me, you and your children and your children's children. as well as your flocks, your herds, and all that you have. I will provide for you there, since there are 5 more years of famine to come, so that you and your household and all that you have will not come to poverty. And now your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my own mouth that speaks to you. You must tell my father how greatly I am honored in Egypt and all that you have seen. Hurry and bring my father down here." Then he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, while Benjamin wept upon his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept upon them. And after that, his brothers talked with him. Okay, as Gayle and I hashed it out, this is the climax of some plot elements that have been building up for a while. The whole story of Joseph takes up about 8,000 words in the Bible. By biblical standards, that's a full novel, because if you told this story in modern style, it would expand to a much greater length. Biblical accounts are very concise, mostly actions and brief conversations. So this story has been building up ever since Joseph went into slavery. For several chapters, we stayed with him and felt his deep sorrow, his handling of terrible injustices, and the wisdom and spiritual strength that he drew on more and more. And then the author brings back the brothers, the ones who jump-started the plot. It's no hyperbole to say this is one of the greatest stories in the history of literature. It's lively, it's emotionally moving, it has politics and geographic sweep, and it uses one of the great literary devices, which is reversal, irony on a grand scale. Joseph was a slave, now he's an international mover and shaker. His brothers had all the power over him, and now they depend upon his charity. And the hero, or villain, unmasked, is a time-honored device too. It creates incredible drama, and we, the audience, are in on the secret of who Joseph is, so we can enjoy it. These are some of the elements that make the story great. But Gayle, walk us through this scene.
Well, Joseph feels deep emotion that he can no longer control. He sends his Egyptian entourage out of the room, and then he switches to his native tongue, which I figure must have knocked his brothers for a loop. He says, "I am Joseph." Just imagine them letting that sink in. And once the shock subsides, is this a good thing or a bad thing? They sold him into slavery, and based on current events, they have to figure he's going to do the same to them. He's framed them. He's taking Benjamin, the brother he loves most, and the rest of them will be slaves. But isn't that how these things go? An eye for an eye? Most stories actually punish the villain at the end. At the end of Little Red Riding Hood, they don't forgive the wolf and set him free.
Gayle, that's Mother Goose. But I agree. The brothers have earned at least some kind of punishment, right? And the opposite happens. Remarkably, Joseph says, "Come closer to me." He comforts them and softens his tone. He's been playing these tricks on them not out of vindictiveness, but because he's curious. Who have my older brothers become down the years? Are they still the ones who thought to murder me? Or have they grown?
Judah steps up. He says, "Take me and let the boy go free." So Joseph knows there's been what you called a great reversal. Judah makes an offer that reflects the sacrifice of Christ. "I will die for my brother's sins." This is why Joseph is so moved at the beginning of this passage. Joseph has been a stranger in a strange land. Ever since his brothers showed up, he's been looking forward to having his family again. Twice he says, "Hurry and bring my father down here." And he promises to care for all of them. It's a story of full, heartfelt grace and reconciliation.
Not only that, notice what else Joseph repeats. He says, "Don't be angry with yourselves. God sent me before you to preserve lives. Then, it was not you who sent me here, but God." And much later, in chapter 50, "Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people." This is the theme of the Joseph story, and here's the thing. For this ancient book of Genesis, we're talking way before Moses, before any law has been delivered, and perhaps 1,000 years before Christ. This is some advanced theology. Not only does it teach us grace and forgiveness, no matter what people have done to us, the reason for that is that God is in control. There is evil, and Joseph doesn't airbrush that. He says, you intended to do harm to me. You intended it for evil. But God is always doing something on a scale much larger than our hurts or what we can see. So while he affirms what they did was wrong, he tells them it's in the past and not to be angry with themselves.
So the question is, was that true just for Joseph because he was Joseph, a pivotal name in history, or is it true for you and me?
Well, we all know the New Testament version of this verse, Romans 8:28. We know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. So, Joseph is telling us, don't be discouraged. God has bigger things in mind. What Paul adds is that these bigger things include our benefit for the good of them that know God. That's really good news, and Joseph understood that. God had his reasons to bring Jacob's family to Egypt, but part of that was to bless Joseph himself and his whole family and to bring them the joy of reconciliation. Everybody wins. So let's break down the takeaways from this story.
Well, reconciliation is a big one, right? How many families are torn apart by bitterness over something that happened in the past?
We've all seen it, of course, and we have to acknowledge there isn't much pain in life that's deeper than family pain. Sometimes it's a tall order to forgive, but we find a way to do it not only because it's right, but for our own peace of mind. Bitterness is a cancer that slowly consumes the soul. How easy would it have been for Joseph to repay evil with evil? And would it really have made him feel better?
And the other big takeaway is that God is in control all the time, no matter what. If I recall, that's known as the sovereignty of God, right? I think that's a total game changer if we can manage to live each day with that as an operating policy.
You bet. God is in control. Now, does that mean he's pulling all the strings? Does it mean we have no free choice? No, I don't believe that at all. God knows where things are going, but he chooses to collaborate with us on all that happens. We make real choices, but that doesn't mean God, who is all-knowing, doesn't see in advance what those choices will be and doesn't see in advance where things are going. Think about jazz music, Gayle.
Okay, I'm thinking about it.
There's a group playing an old standard like Night and Day or All the Things You Are, one of those songs. They know the verses of that song musically, the players do. They know where it's going, but the piano player or the guitar player will take a solo and improvise. The others don't know exactly what notes he or she is going to play, but they play along, they collaborate. The result is a piece of music that goes where it's supposed to go, but there's exciting interplay involved between the musicians. And that's what makes jazz special, the musical conversation between the players that happens in real time. In life, God knows where it's all going, but he chooses to collaborate with us as we improvise and play our own notes.
So, in other words, there was more to this lesson than you thought, eh?
Not too bad. I still wish we'd have gotten to study Potiphar's wife. Maybe next time around, but for the time being,
Thanks for listening.